What would you like to see changed in the way that we educate, I guess, younger people?
I'd just like to see us as a society move more along Scandinavian lines and actually value early childhood. New Zealanders, by and large, think early childhood is shitty nappies and blowing noses, and that learning starts when you get to school. So understanding that we've got that wrong,
Hmm.
yeah, I think just following Scandinavian to whakamana is the Māori word, to give more prestige to early childhood and just how precious that first 1,000 days is. And
Hmm.
what I'd really like to see is I'd like to see us pay one of the parents 80% of their salary to stay at home in the first year of life with the child, so that every child has a parent at home in the first year of life. I think that would dramatically, 20 years later, reduce our suicide rates and child delinquency and stuff, because the cognitive structures that you need to be resilient, a lot of them are down to that first year of life, and they're down largely to that one-on-one relationship with the primary caregiver. Put as simply as I can say, the human brain's not designed to be born and go into a relationship with 16 people. The way the
Mm.
human brain develops, it's born designed to have what the literature calls a dyadic relationship, just coming from the word dyad, two-way, triads, three. So a dyadic is designed to have a one-on-one relationship. Basically, the human brain is designed to have one relationship, and that forms the blueprint for all of its future relationships. And from that blueprint, it learns to have 2 relationships, 4 relationships, 8 relationships, 16 relationships. You can't undo hundreds of thousands of years of evolution and go straight to 4 relationships first. It
Right.
has to start with a dyadic relationship. So when Scandinavian countries pay mum 80% of her salary to stay at home, they make it mum because then there's all the benefits of breastfeeding as well. But I'd argue, because I've done it, is that you can still have a dad at home looking after the baby and the baby continue to be breastfed. It's not that difficult. Dad just
Mm.
has to take the baby down to be breastfed. But because the literature doesn't say the baby gets better outcomes staying at home with mum, the literature says very clearly the baby gets better outcomes staying at home with the most responsive parent.
Right. So
So
it
the
doesn't.
mums,
Right. Interesting.
yeah, it's whoever's going to talk to the baby and hold the baby in partnership and be the most responsive to the baby. If mum's a computer analyst who likes to stare at a screen and is fairly flat-faced, and dad's
Right.
like an over-animated PE teacher, then dad's going to be way better to stay at home because the interaction is going to be way more in that first year. So it's responsiveness.
What's the
So
literature
yeah,
like? Oh, sorry. Fire away. Go ahead.
no, I'd just say that's how we'd start for a start. If we
Yeah.
wanted to make changes in our society, you'd value that first year at home and move to New Zealand having a society where nearly every child can have a parent stay at home in the first year of life. And then we would move to, like I said before, following Te Whāraki until the child's 7,
Hmm.
and then moving into the traditional school curriculum. Mhm.
Two things on that. Then, if the dyadic relationship is so important, um,
Yep.
is there an argument to be made for not putting your child in early child care? Is
Yeah, there
there?
is an argument to be made for not putting a child in childcare. It's just that it's too overly simplistic to then leap to the conclusion that going into childcare for your baby is going to damage them. Just because it's not good for them
Hmm.
or doesn't do them any benefit doesn't mean it has necessarily done them any harm.
Right.
Um, but they're always worried about saying it because you don't want to make parents feel guilty. I think I'm
Hmm.
a wee bit safer to say it because I put all of my kids in childcare in the first year of life, so I'm now allowed to trash it and say that the research says basically that there's no benefits for a child being in a childcare centre in the first 3 years of life. Actually, none. There are no research-based benefits. All the benefits around human development are based around that dyadic relationship, and they're largely about a couple of intimate relationships in those first 3 years. But again, it does not mean the child's wrecked by going into childcare in the first 3 years of life, because
Hmm.
if the child already comes from a 2-parent family with involved grandparents and speaks 2 languages, and he's already so resilient that childcare is going to be fine. It's just that it's not, there are no research-based benefits to it. Even the benefits for being in a childcare centre for a child 3 to 6, all of the research benefits are accrued in a 2-hour session 4 times a week. So when you do
Wow.
it 5 times a week, there's no more benefits than there was on 4 times. When you make it a 4-hour session instead of 2.5, 3, there's no more benefits. The benefits tap out at 2.5 to 3 hours, 4 days a week. That's why kindergarten used to start at 3 and was 4 days a week and was a 2.5 hour session to 3 hour session, because that's what
Right.
the research said. We used to put human development at the center and then build the curriculum around it. In the last 20 years, children haven't suddenly evolved and get benefits from being there for longer or being there 8 hours a day. It's that we moved child development from the center of the curriculum and replaced it with the economy. It's better for the economy to have children in full-time care so that
Hmm.
parents can go to work. But from a purely child-centric point of view of what's beneficial for the child, because my job to have to know all this, is that there are no benefits in the first 3 years. Doesn't mean it's going to harm them. There's just no benefits. I don't know. We could talk for hours because parents are going to go, oh, well, surely they must have better social skills. No, they don't. You don't get better social skills by skipping the dyadic relationship and going and hanging out straight with lots of other kids. The reason you've got good social skills is because you had a strong basis for them, which was the dyadic relationship. You learnt to love and be nice and respectful to one other person, then you can extend it to others. If we skip that and put them straight in a childcare centre, that delays their social skills because they haven't got that dyadic basis. It's a bit complicated, but basically the earlier they go into a childcare centre, the earlier they receive an aggressive response from the environment. And the earlier
that makes total sense. Yeah. This kid takes the truck away from this kid, and then it's just a conflict.
They hit him back. They hit him.
Right.
What I say to parents is that when that 8-month-old is at home with you and they can't control their limbs and you're holding them on your hip and they reach out and slap your face, you don't slap the baby back.
Right.
Even when you move them over to the other hip and they reach out and slap your face again, you still don't slap the baby back. You respond in what the literature calls a pro-social way. You're like, oh, be careful, darling. That pro-social is like Māori use the term ahura mōwai, like a sacred paradise haven. The baby is shielded from aggressive response because you're in love with them and you adore them. And no matter how many times they slap your face, you're like, oh, be careful, darling, and just move them. Whereas that same baby's 8 months old, can't control their limbs. Now they reach out, who they're slapping is the 12-month-old beside them. The 12-month-old will slap them back likely.
Right. So
now your baby's receiving an aggressive response from the environment. So the earlier you receive an aggressive response, the higher your levels of aggression. So the earlier you start a childcare centre, the higher your levels of aggression. The higher your levels of aggression, the more you delay your social skills. So I know that's just more to make parents feel guilty, but I just know that their common sense will tell them that a baby that's been in childcare since 6 weeks old is going to have advanced social skills. And no, that's not how humans work. You don't make a better university graduate by putting them into university at 18 months of age. It's not how human development is. You've got to meet the needs they've got at the time to build up like a staircase.
Got you. It's like a pyramid. You get the building blocks, next one.
That's exactly right. It is a pyramid. The literature actually uses that pyramid concept. Bruce Perry is one of the big names, and he uses the neurosequential model, which is a pyramid going up the four chunks of the brain.
Based on your time frame and what age you're at and everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Were you involved in, I'm guessing you were probably very prevalent during the anti-smacking laws that were getting introduced. What was that, 2008? Was that the case?
Yeah. Oh, I can't remember the exact date, but I remember the times and events around it.
Because from what you're telling me, it slaps in the, not to use the wrong analogy, but it slaps in the face of everything like anyone who's pro-smacking advocates for.
It amazes me that people can be pro-smacking. It amazes me that people are willing to march in the streets for the right to hit their child. It amazes me that we have had better laws protecting the family dog than we did our children. And no one was marching in the streets demanding for the right to hit their dog back. It had been illegal for a long time to beat your dog. But they were marching in the streets for the right to smack their children. I understand smacking children. I've got lots of kids, and the younger ones weren't smacked, but I've smacked kids before. But it wasn't because I don't then justify it as a good parenting strategy. I admit that I got angry and lost control and did it as a reflex because it's how I was parented. But then I made the decision of, oh no, I don't want to be that parent. I don't want to do that. And very early on, just stop doing that. So I'm not coming from a place of judgment of not understanding being raised in a generation where you were smacked all the time, that it's not kind of your first a whole culture that validates it. Actually, a whole culture that tells you the kid's going to be horrible if you don't smack them. They're going to be spoiled and stuff. It's just, it blows my mind that people think like that. So the way my thing is to try and how do you help people to shift? So what I usually do is start to compare it to, I say, well, surely your child is worth the same human. Are they worthy of full human rights? Or are they a human being, or are they a human becoming? Are they someone who's going to become worthy of human rights when they're 18, or are they a human being now worthy of full human rights? Because if I said to you, I don't really beat my wife, I just give her a quick slap so that she knows the difference between right and wrong. How does that statement make you feel when I'm talking about my wife instead of my child?
It's very different.
So if it's so wrong for me to say that about my spouse, why is it okay to say it about my child? all the arguments that you give for why you hit children are exactly the same arguments we gave historically for why we should maintain the right to hit our wives.
Right.
Their brains aren't large enough, and they're less intelligent than us to really be able to comprehend complex reasoning. So a good sharp whack just is all their brain can comprehend. That's exactly what we used to say about women. It was bullshit then. And it's exactly what we say now about children. It's bullshit now. Children can absolutely comprehend, and actually they're going to be far more intelligent. And the research shows us they're going to get far better outcomes if they're raised in that aware, having a conversation, negotiating, respectful boundaries. I just think, I'm only happy with the statement if you can replace my child with my wife and it's still an okay statement. If it's not an okay statement, then it's not an okay statement for me with your child either. Your child is worthy of the same rights as your wife. Your child is actually more vulnerable than your wife. So if your wife's worthy of that protection, I would say your child's twice as worthy because they're so much more vulnerable than your wife. And the wife is vulnerable, but the child's even more vulnerable.
It speaks to like a lot of the idea of restorative justice rather than corporal punishment, even for adults. Do you see any of the work that you do kind of filter up in a way? Because the smacking is the exact same thing as I'm going to punish you by, not the exact same thing, but there's a line of similarity between I'm going to smack my child to teach him that that's not okay. I'm going to put this person in prison for 5 years to teach him that that's not okay. And
it's a punishment model from a research
totally. And I don't think the verdict. I think the verdict's pretty out that both those things don't work. You know?
No, in fact, they do the exact opposite to what we're trying to achieve. They turn people into career criminals. They cost the taxpayer millions and millions of dollars. And it's hard to do that cultural thing. When you get a kid who's graffitied the town hall and is, spat on the mayor, people will think he needs a good kick up the ass and he needs punished, as if that's going to make him go, oh, I better be good from now on and turn into a good citizen, even though the research shows no, we just put him into a negative system. He gets delinquent friends. He just embarks on a path of delinquency and becomes a career criminal. If instead we invested in, I'm just making this up as I go, but we invested something. We, paid a foster parent to look after him full time and attached to him. If we paid money to build a youth centre and gave the kid a job there and stuff, people would go, "What? Oh, he's a bloody criminal and he's getting all of the."
He's getting a handout. You're enabling him. Yeah,
there's a negative culture against helping people and a positive culture against punishing them. Even though we've got 100 years worth of research to show that, and like we said right at the start, there is no exact right amount either. That's what people think. It's not, no, I just gave them a little whack. No, the little whack, the kid only gets a little whack because that's what most kids get. They don't really get once warriors hidings. They get smacked. But the kids who just get the little smack, they statistically, on average, they don't do quite as well as the kids who got none. It is very exact that the right research-based amount is 0. You get so much better outcomes when you're raised because your brain's not being raised in a hostile environment. Just like it does for a woman or a man living in domestic violence, when you're constantly living under fear, that has really negative impacts on your brain. So it's the same for children.
Thank you for watching that clip. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit that subscribe button on the left. And if you want to watch the full episode, hit the square on the bottom. To watch another small clip, go ahead and hit that square on top. And if you just want to listen to the full episode but don't have time to watch it, you can find this podcast wherever podcasts are listened to. Thanks. Bye.